Well, 2017 is a special year in the history of the Ryman Auditorium. This amazing facility turns 125 years old in 2017, and we here at WSM are so thrilled to partner with the Ryman for I Played the Ryman, a wonderful series of interviews that Eric Markham and I are getting to do throughout the year, and a pleasure to welcome Steven Curtis Chapman to this edition.
Thank you, brother. It is great to be with you.
Well, thank
Always.
you. Thank you for hanging out with us. As we speak, we are backstage at the Ryman, a couple hours before showtime from the amazing Sam's Place series that Steven has been hosting for the last few years. But so much history for you in this building. You've headlined it as an artist. You've played it on the Opry, and that was certainly emotional. And obviously this series. But take me back. First time you ever walked in this place?
Yeah, it's the first time I was here was to actually play Sam's Place way back many years ago when my buddy Gary Chapman, we decided to keep it in the family even though we're not related, over the years when I when we brought Sam's Place back, and I was like, can I host it this time? Can this Chapman have a shot at it this time? And so I was that was many years ago, and I'm pretty sure that was my first time here. As a performer. Now, I'd come and seen some shows here. And, of course, growing up, when I was a little boy, growing up in Paducah, Kentucky, a couple hours away from here, if the weather was just right, we could pick up WSM and we would hear the Grand Ole Opry.
Yep.
And my dad, my dad is a huge fan of country music. I grew up, hearing, Hank Williams Sr. and my dad, playing, I'm so lonesome I could cry and Your Cheating Heart and all those great songs, and Johnny Cash songs. First song I learned on the guitar was Folsom Prison Blues with Johnny Cash song. And so, those are the memories. My dad's best friend growing up is a guy named Jack Curtis Martin, thus Steven Curtis Chapman. I was actually named after Jack Curtis Martin. The middle name was borrowed from his best buddy growing up who played dobro. And his boyhood dream, was to someday play with Flatt and Scruggs and Bill Monroe. And he ended up getting the opportunity to play with those guys. So that was my dad's childhood best buddy who ended up playing dobro with Flatt and Scruggs and with Bill Monroe. And so just amazing opportunities, or amazing, memories and just this reverence of this building. So first time even just to walk in to see a concert here and a show, I was in awe. Never really at that point imagining I'll be on that stage someday. And then, getting the opportunity to be here, and then to think that someday I would get to host a show that was here regularly was beyond anything I could have imagined, could have ever hoped for, to be familiar with, to walk these halls and it feel like home. When you first walk in, you're kind of in such awe as every performer, and you're still here. You never get over that. When you sit in these rooms and you think of who sat in these rooms, who stood on that stage, who still stands on that stage regularly. It's always such an amazing, humbling thing, and just a really special place. It's more, what we do here with Sam's Place, of course, is, taking it back to its roots, as a church.
The old Union Gospel.
There you go. Union Gospel Tabernacle. Yeah, all are welcome.
Thank you for speaking English.
Right. Yeah, let me help you out with that. I know where he's going. But the Union Gospel Tabernacle. That's a mouthful. Yeah. But that's what this was originally, a church, and of course built, for Samuel Jones, and a place for him to preach. Tom Ryman wanted him to have a building so he didn't have to set up that big tent because he was a tent preacher. And so, what's really special about this series is we get to take it back to its gospel roots, and it's called Music for the Spirit. And a lot of the artists are either gospel music artists or a lot of country artists, different genres, but they come together kind of around their faith, and let's sing songs. Sing your hit, but sing a hymn if you want to, and we'll just mix all that together. But a song really that is music for the spirit, as much as for the heart and soul, really to lift your spirit. And it's just been such a special thing, because this place really is, it feels like holy ground. It's musical, musically sacred, but it's there's some really special things about just the purpose of this building and what it represents to all of Nashville, but to music, the music world.
Even an afternoon sound check, when that sunlight comes through the stained glass windows, takes on almost a spiritual quality, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's special.
Yeah. From an acoustic standpoint, too, when you stand on that stage and knowing that what you're sending out there is going to sound as good as it's going to sound anywhere in the world, that's got to be a comforting factor, too, huh?
Yeah, it really is. That's one of the things that people will say. I usually, most of the performers, if you see these, people on stage with these things sticking in their ears, it looks like, they got earplugs. It's not because they can't stand to listen to themselves. That's the monitors that most of us use now on stage, and they become, a regular part of most live performances. But when I play here at Sam's Place, anytime I play the stage here at the Ryman, I don't use my in-ear monitors.
Just the wedges,
I just want the wedges, and I want to hear the room, and I want to hear what's happening, because you stick those things in your ears, and it literally is like earplugs. You only hear what comes through those little speakers, and it sounds really good. In most venues, you have to have that for it to really sound right. But in this place, I never wear those because I just feel like I'm missing out on so much of what makes the Ryman the Ryman. It's the sound, it's the way it moves, it's the sort of the spirit that waves in and out of all the sound waves and creates this really special place that it only. Like you said, it really only sounds that good here in this building.
You talked about the Opry as a child and how vital that was for your family listening on the radio. We could talk a lot of Opry memories, but I'm going to pick two. Actually, you were just on the stage 48 hours ago.
That's right.
Out at the Opry House. Take me back to that first appearance on the Opry, because it's a wonderful story, and you tell it so wonderfully in the book.
Oh gosh,
so.
Yes, I did get to
Mr.
share
Acuff
it in
kind of
detail.
saved you inadvertently, right?
He did.
Okay.
Yeah. Little did he know that he was actually launching my career as much as a singer, maybe as part comedian, part singer, part entertainer. But when I was just terrified as a 20-year-old kid, I was working at Opryland back when we had the amusement park that was kind of part of the Grand Ole Opry facility, but outside the front door there was a whole amusement park, and a lot of people will remember those days, great days that sadly are gone now. We've got the big shopping mall there, but we used to have even before the Opryland Hotel was there. I remember when they started building that when I was working at Opryland, and so we had this great amusement park and live music shows there that many artists, a lot of performers, Diamond Rio got started there. My buddy Marty Rowe, the lead singer, and I were Flat and Scruggs. We performed every day and put on the hats and the ties and the whole deal, and played the role of Flat and Scruggs. I sang George Jones' song in the show, and it was a country music kind of a review where we would dress up and do a chorus of all these country music hits. And so I got hired there with my brother when I was 19 years old, just graduated from high school. And they would ask kids from the park on Saturday matinee, they would every so often grab a kid out of the park, bring him over to the Opry stage, and give him a shot to let him sing a song and say, "Hey, here's some future stars, some rising stars of the of the future. We've got all the stars here tonight of today and the past, but here's some future stars coming up." And they asked me to sing, and I was blown away, couldn't believe it. Called my dad, said, "Dad, I've been asked to sing on the Grand Ole Opry. Will you come, Mom? Come." And my brother Herbie, who was in the show with me, was sitting in the audience. My grandmother, who's passed on now, my sweet grandmother Dorothy Chapman, was there, and I walked out on stage. Roy Acuff introduced me. Said he walked out and said, we got a young fella from the park, from the Opryland, and go over and visit him. Go see the shows after you're done here if you haven't already. But we brought this fellow over. We bring him over occasionally, and he's going to sing a song that he sings in his show over there in the park. And I walked out on stage and I sang "He Stopped Loving Her Today." That was a song I sang every day in the park. And so I'd sung this song, the chorus, probably 300 times by now, because I sang it 5 times a day. We did little short shows, and we did them one after another. So I walked out on stage. I sang the whole song and made it through the song. But I barely got through it because I was terrified and I was excited and I couldn't believe it. And I got through, and Roy threw me a curve because he walked back over to me. He was standing off side of the stage, walks out there, and I'll never forget, he grabbed my arm kind of right here and he's like steady himself, you know, and he kind of held himself there, and he said, well, Steve, I think they liked you. Why don't you give them that chorus one more time? Let's have an encore. So he called for an encore. Well, that threw me. I totally was like, now we're off the page. I wasn't prepared for that. And I'm like, what do we do? How does this work? You know, how do you? And so the band hit the chord to start just the chorus, because, you know, the song starts with, he said, I love you till I die. So it just threw me, and I'm like, okay, an encore. Just give them a chorus. So I'm kind of like, boom. They hit the chord, and I go, he stopped loving her today. And then I looked out, and I saw my dad, and I saw my mom, and I thought, Roy Acuff's right there, and there's my grandmother, and there's my brother, and I don't know what I'm doing out here. And I went totally blank, and I forgot the words after I just sang the song all the way through to make it look even more like, what is wrong with this guy? So I'm fumble, and I'm like, and I'm looking behind me, and I hear the band. They're all sitting back there playing, and they're looking at me going, they placed a wreath on his door. They're trying to give me the words because they know I'm just dying. So I finally get caught up with it. And they vamp for a couple of, you know, bars, and I finally, they placed a wreath upon his door, and I start singing. I get done with it, and I'm just thinking, well, that was the beginning and the end of my career.
There it is.
There it was. You just saw my career in 15 minutes, start to finish. And Roy walks over. He says, well, Steve, well, it seemed like you might have forgot the words there for a minute. And this was, if I've ever had a moment on stage where I think God gave me words to speak that I didn't know what I was going to say at the perfect time. Yep. The first thing that came to mind, and I'm ashamed of it, but I'm thankful for it at the same time, but because at the time, a lot of us remember George was really struggling a lot at that time, and struggling getting up on stage and showing up, and he was, you know, everybody was calling him No Show Jones. Sure. That was the era of No Show Jones. Thankfully, he got it, you know, got cleaned up, got much healthier and better. But this was a rough time in his journey. And the first thing came to mind was just I just spoke what I thought, and I said, you know, no, Roy, I actually just wanted to sing it like George sings it these days. And boy, the crowd, they immediately got it, and they roared, and they thought it was the funniest thing. And I was just thinking, thank you, God, for giving me something to somehow redeem that, you know, dig out of the hole. And Roy thought it was great. And I remember I walked off stage. We walked back to his dressing room where I was a couple of nights ago, and he came over and he said, son, he said, I think you got a future. Because if you can pull that off and make something out of that moment, you can make it in this business. I was like, all right, from Roy Acuff, there you go.
Oh, goodness. Well, let's fast forward to just a few years ago and the Deep Roots album, Special Cracker Barrel project, and you got your dad and your brother on the Opry stage.
You know, that was a really amazing moment for me as well, getting to have my father, who, as I said, you know, he was in the audience watching his boy up there, and it's a really special story. I think I might have shared it, you know, a little bit before when we were together on the radio program. I didn't even know this part of the story, but my dad used to make trips to Nashville to try to make it in music, and wrote some songs for a while with the Glacier Brothers, and was kind of dabbled in it and tried to get his foot in the door, and had some little moments of looked like it might be a break, but eventually my brother and I were getting older, and my dad didn't have a father. His father was an alcoholic, and my dad had a real rough go of it as a young man. My grandfather passed away. My dad was a young boy, and so my dad just said, you know what, I don't want my boys to grow up without a father, so I'm gonna be a dad. I'm not gonna keep trying to do this music thing. It's taking me away from home all the time, and my boys need a dad at home, and I don't want them to have the experience I had without a dad. He really made that decision, and he went back. He told the group he was with that he was going to not, you know, he's going to quit the group. He was in a folk bluegrass kind of group, and back in Kentucky. And the last trip he made to Nashville to write some songs, and he knew it was the last trip. He just felt like, you know what, I think this is the last time I'm going to do this. He said he drove by the Ryman Auditorium. The windows were open, and it was the Opry. And he had a dream of someday playing on the Opry. And he said, I sat out in my car, rolled the windows down. It was hot, and they would open the windows. Back in the day, they didn't have air conditioner here. And he said, I'd listen, and I think one of these days I'm going to be there. And he said, I remember that time I sat in my car, and I thought, you know what? That's a dream I'm going to have to give up, but I'm doing it for the right reason. I'm going home. I'm going to be a dad. I'm going to be involved in the lives of my kids. And he told that story on the stage of the Ryman Auditorium about 45 years later, when he said, you know, here I sit on the stage of the Ryman Auditorium singing with my two sons. I don't think that would have happened had I not chosen the course that I did. And, you know, so just that's the kind of thing that happens at the Grand Ole Opry, at the Ryman Auditorium. It's pretty special. It's just a special memory for me, a special story, a special place, and really, really blessed that I get to be a part of that story.
We've reached the product placement portion of the program.
Yes, please, if you will.
Between Heaven and the Real World is the autobiography of Steven Curtis Chapman, and you go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. It is your story.
Yeah.
When you're ready to do that, when you're ready, this is the time to do that. You need someone to be there with you that you can be in that foxhole with.
Yeah.
Ken Abraham's the real deal, isn't he?
He is absolutely the real deal. He's such a great man, a great friend. I've known Ken for years and years, and a great writer. I mean, he's helped a lot of folks tell their story that otherwise we wouldn't have. Jimmy Wayne did Sam's Place with me here last year, and great hard story, but I'm so glad he told it. And I think he, like me, would have felt, you know, it's a daunting task to think, all right, you sit down, you stare at a blank piece of paper or a blank computer screen and go, once upon a time I was born, you know, and you go, how in the world am I going to weave this story together and just in you know, less than 10 years be able to write this story. And Ken was a brilliant partner in that process.
I follow you on Twitter and Instagram. It was kind of cool when the book came out that you would be in airports and bookstores, and I'm sure I'm sure there were actual book signings, but I thought the coolest thing was you just find a few copies and randomly sign them.
It was so funny.
You know, what's kind of funny, and you may not have intended it this way, but I almost took it as it's almost a wonderful parable on faith, because here it is, you're doing this wonderful deed and you're not getting you won't see the payoff, but you know the payoff is there. You know someone's going to get that book, open it up and go, whoa, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, that was so fun. It was so fun. And I would hear people, you know, that's one of the fun things about social media. There's a lot of things I don't like about it because it's just so, you know, I'm not good at it. And that's the worst thing about it, is that I'm just not good at it. It's not natural for me. You know, I'm what they call a digital immigrant, not a native. You know, I didn't grow up with it. You know, my kids are natives. They just, it's in their blood. You know, they pick it up. I have a
4-year-old who just knows how to swipe.
I know.
It's crazy.
But they're already good at it. And I'm just like, I'm trying to figure this out. But that was so fun when occasionally people would say, I found one of your books, you know, and how else would I have ever known that except that through social media they would put a little comment somewhere and I'd say, they found one. It's just a really pretty cool little thing to do. Yeah.
When I was reading your book, everyone has parts of the Bible that they love. There are parts that sections you maybe never read because you know it's going to be tough to get through that part, you know? So, but the Psalms were something that I never got. And then earlier this year we were doing a Bible study and we were doing the Psalms of Ascent. And I realized that these songs were these people were struggling. They were in some of the worst places you could be, and yet they had that faith and they were singing out. And you wrote at one point, the Psalms became like oxygen for me at some of the darkest moments. What was it about them that hit home for you?
Well, it's exactly what you were just saying. I, like so many, you know, there's so many Psalms and so many songs that it's one of the things about, you know, the Christian faith and how we feel like we're supposed to have it more together and more figured out than we really do. And so we have to almost pretend, or we feel like we do, that, hey, everything's good. And, you know, every day with Jesus is sweeter than the day before, one of those great hymns I grew up singing. And I'm thinking, I must be really messed up because some days aren't better than the day before. Some days are harder than I ever imagined. And I can't imagine it ever getting better. But what do I do with that? Because that must mean I'm not a Christian, or I don't believe, or what's wrong with me. And I think the Psalms, you know, in a way, a lot of times before I really walked through the darkest places of my journey, I almost thought of the Psalms that way, you know, that better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere, which is an incredible, true psalm. There's a great worship song that sings that over and over again. And I'm like, man, I know it's true, and I know I'm supposed to believe it. But I'm having a hard time right now connecting with that because that just seems so far off from me and so distant from what I'm feeling right now. And when I began to discover in the Psalms, as you were calling the Psalms of Ascent, is that what you said? That so many of those psalms that are these, your love is better than life, these hopeful declarations, if you back up to the beginning of those chapters, so many of them start with, how long, O Lord? Are you going to forget me forever?
Yep.
I am sinking down. I'm going down for the last time. I'm not going to survive. I'm out of oxygen. I'm out of hope. And all of a sudden, when I discovered that, for me, it was like, whoa! And this is the man after God's own heart. This is David. This is King David. This is the psalmist. It was okay for him to say that. It was okay. He didn't get struck by lightning for saying, God, where are you? I don't even know if you are, where you are, but then he would say, but I'm going to trust you. And that was just saying, even though I feel all of these things, and I'm going to acknowledge, I'm not going to pretend it's not real. I'm going to acknowledge it. And then I'm going to be able to say, but I'm choosing to believe this. That I guess is what I mean when I say it was like oxygen. I could go, I can breathe that in.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite gospel?
Does
it change sometimes?
It does. Yeah. I think it kind of moves around a bit. But different verses and different that are all of a sudden like that. Just they're the lifeline. They're the anchor rope. And you hold on to.
I'm partial to Luke, and you're going to laugh at the reason. But when I found out that that's what Linus read from in A Charlie Brown Christmas. Because, Charles Schultz, for so many young kids who maybe weren't brought up that way, that was a very subtle but powerful way of getting that message through.
I love it.
So when I found that was Luke, I'm like, Luke's my favorite now.
That's my favorite. I'm a huge Charlie Brown fan myself, so I'm with you on that one.
A lot of exciting things happening. A solo acoustic tour this year, starting in the fall. I love the concept of that too, because it's just you and a guitar out there, right?
Yeah. Me just telling the story. It's a lot of, I love story, and I'm a storyteller at heart. I love telling stories. I love remembering stories. I think it's something that's so important, for us. And I've learned a lot in writing my book about the power of remembering. I love that you're doing this series about the Ryman. We don't, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel like the human condition is such that, at least in the culture that we live in, is so driven towards the next thing. We gotta, what's coming next. Whatever you did back there, okay, that's fine. But it's really, you're only as good as your next hit song or whatever in our business. And I think for me to go back and remember and tell my story was so powerful for me. It stirred things in me that I really needed to have stirred. I fell in love with my wife again, just retelling our story, at 33 years when that was really important for me to do and remember that part of our journey. So I feel like that's, the thing with this tour that I'm getting to do is really tell the story, and certainly sing a lot of the hit songs and the songs that people have come to want to hear from me. But I feel like, man, I've done that for 30 years now, a lot of those songs. And what could make this really special for myself and for people? So I'm kind of doing, it's almost a little Prairie Home Companion sort of meets, a Steven Curtis Chapman concert. And I really sort of take people into the story. I play a little bit of, first song I learned on the guitar. I play a little Folsom Prison Blues, I play a little bit of He Stopped Loving Her Today, and tell them the story, and just kind of take people on a journey with me. I hope it's as special for them as it is for me to do that.
And the great part about reading this book is your music, whether intentionally or unintentionally, really was a soundtrack to this book. I can't tell you how many times I'd heard Cinderella, but to listen to Cinderella and then Spring is Coming back to back is so poignant. And then you also turned me on to people. I grew up Catholic, so there were lots of songs we sang about the same 25 all the time. So a guy like Dallas Holm was off the charts for me. Never heard of him. So I went and searched him out, and Russ Taff and the Imperials. So the book was, it worked for me on so many levels. I hope others found that same thing.
Wow, thank you, buddy. That's so good.
Well, I appreciate the time. I know we're invading your pre-show routine. I'm not sure what it is, but it's been a lot of fun, and
thank you.
Enjoy the show tonight.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, man. Good
Steven
to be with
Curtis
you.
Chapman, I Played the Ryman.